What's up, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today, Bryan and myself are going to talk more around choosing the right gym. This is something that I find very, very important to myself, and it is an area that I think so many people kind of fall short in comparison and really selecting the gym for more appropriate reasons for the time that you spend there. I know Bryan has a lot of input on this as a prior gym owner, so we're going to dive into this. But before we do, Bryan, what's the latest?
Yeah, lots of updates. Let's start with a really awesome, exciting update, which is I bought myself a functional trainer.
Excellent.
And it's even more than a functional trainer because it also has a high and a low pulley. So it essentially has like a high pulley, a low pulley, and then it has the two arms on either side with the cable that kind of just runs up and down vertically. Um, and this is awesome. I've always wanted one of these, and I've been complaining about the limiting ability of my current cable machine with the single pulley, not having a dual pulley. So this new machine that I bought, the brand is Tough Stuff. A lot of people have asked me about this on Instagram. They have great reviews. This machine is like a 9.7 out of 10 when you Google it, which is a pretty good rating. So the one thing this machine doesn't do that my current cable machine does is it doesn't have the pads that go over your thighs for pull downs. So I'm just going to have to be a little bit creative and use, some of the N1 approaches to doing pull downs and weighing myself down. So people have done things like use dip belts to weigh themselves down, put a dumbbell across your knee, things like that. But I'm just going to have to get a little creative if I'm doing like a vertical pulling lat movement. I think from what I understand, anything done from the low pulley, it doesn't have the same issue.
Mm-hmm. How much of like a traditional style, like upper back pull down, are you even really envisioning yourself doing? The reason I guess
Yeah,
I
not
ask
much.
is because if like you look at that N1 style vertical pull down, where they'll be like chest supported, you have friction of that bench and the way you're positioned, you may not really run into that situation.
So I do run into that, or at least I assume that I will, because my back is stronger than I guess most people, or rather, it's just a strong body part for me. Mm-hmm. So when I'm doing a heavy set of 6 to 10 reps, I assume that higher pulley is going to pull me out of the chest supported position.
Gotcha.
So I think the single arm stuff would definitely be a solution. Like even the chest supported single arm pull down versus doing both arms at the same time. But if I can figure out a way to keep myself from rising out of the seat doing dual arms, both arms, that would obviously be my preference because single arm stuff just takes double the amount of time.
It does.
And so, yeah. But yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's actually being delivered tomorrow. So when this podcast drops next week, it will have already been in my basement for 6 days. And that kind of leads me into the next series of my updates, which is my usual weekly complaints about my strength cycle. So I'm just kind of being facetious with that, but this is now the third straight week that I'm going to complain a little bit about fatigue and just kind of talk about fatigue as like a learning session for us here. So primarily as it relates to the deadlift, I've just been like up and down over the last few weeks, right? So I talked about a couple weeks ago how I took a deadlift deload and I didn't do anything heavy. I lowered volume, and then I came back the following week and had my best deadlift session yet. Like I pulled a 460 single that flew around. It was great. It was super fast. Then I went heavy again at the end of the week and did some heavy RDLs 4 days later. And then I come around and turn through the weekend and do my session yesterday. 465 feels like the heaviest 465 I've ever picked up in my life. It was just awful. I did the rep and I was like, I went lightheaded, like I just almost fell over. It was so heavy. I've never felt 465 that heavy before. And it's this moment in my training where now I have to decide kind of whether this is the second time that this deadlift issue has popped up for me. Do I need like a deadlift deload every other week? Like, is that a solution? Do I need to take the RDL out of my training on Friday so that I don't have too heavy hip hinges? Maybe the Friday session becomes a hip extension, or maybe it just becomes a leg curl. Just take the entire hip hinge mechanism out of it so that I'm fresher for the deadlifts on Mondays. I don't exactly know what the answer is, but I did have an interesting discussion. Brandon DeCruz and I, Brandon's been on the podcast a number of times. He actually wrote me a really cool long response about kind of some thoughts he had on the issue, and his suggestion was actually to potentially take a deadlift specific deload, which then we discussed further, and I told him that I had done that the prior week and then it worked and whatever, and his suggestion was, yeah, maybe you just do like kind of a neurological week for deadlift where it's like, half the weight and reps are just for speed, so you're still greasing the groove of the skill, but you're not going heavy. And so again, I don't know if that's like just a band-aid, if it's like a 1 week band-aid where then I come back the next week and I feel great, and then then another week later I have another shitty performance again. So I'm still trying to kind of grasp around this whole idea of this fatigue that I'm getting from the deadlifts, because it's not, I don't think it's a systemic fatigue, because all of my other movements are continuing to progress. Like all the pull down stuff, all the bench press stuff, my low bar back squats are even progressing. So it's really like an acute thing that's just affecting my deadlifts. And I just like kind of need to take another chill week and come back and see what happens, I think. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
I mean, the initial thing that comes to my mind, and some of this is some, subjective perception of my own, feelings with training, is I think it's probably the heavy RDLs on Friday. Mm-hmm. Like recovering from, like, of course. So it's interesting because like deadlifts, yes, they're very like hamstring and hip taxing, but they don't necessarily like feel that much,
Mm-hmm.
not from like a hypertrophy standpoint, that subjective kind of soreness DOMs you get from it, but we know they are, right? Of course, it's a heavy hip hinge. But I'm wondering, like, with that combination of like the RDLs, like RDLs just fuck me up, like, and I mean that in like a great way, like I perform them, I get beat up from them. And I think that just might be doing it. And one of the hamstrings are one of those things, like when they're like kind of sore, like you will not perform well, in those hip hinging movements when they're kind of like that. So initially that was my thought, like maybe subbing that for, just a leg curl type movement would be more beneficial.
Yeah, that's kind of my initial thought too, because I've also been compromised in subsequent hip hinge sessions by going too heavy, and so like I'm okay if I do like an RDL and a good morning, or an RDL and a stiff-legged deadlift, because I think the tension is just more specific to the hamstrings and glutes. But the deadlift is kind of a new beast introducing into my program, so I don't know about having a deadlift on Monday and an RDL on Friday. Maybe it's deadlift on Monday, and then it's either like really light deadlifts, like 225 speed reps on Friday, or it's like you said, like a leg curl or possibly like a hip extension or something like that. But I did also go heavier than I have all cycle on Friday with the RDL. I went to 365, which was 20 pounds up from two weeks prior, and then did some back off sets at 315. So it's not even like I was going like super light on the RDL. Like I kind of pushed it a little bit. But anyway, I appreciate that Brandon jumped in and gave some input too, and he and I had a cool, interesting discussion about how a lot of people always are talking about deloads needing to be across everything. Like you take a deload week, that means your effort across all movements is lower, or your volume's lower, or whatever it is. You deload in some manner across the whole body. And we were talking about how a lot of people really underutilize either muscle group deloads or specific lift deloads. And it's not that this is going to extend your runway double. It's not like, you're at week 6 and you usually would take a full body deload and then you do a back deload and suddenly you have 6 more weeks in you. But like, it's one of those things where maybe you're at week 6 and you can tell that there's one muscle group or one lift that really feels like it's fatiguing you. So maybe you deload that lift and then you get another 2 or maybe 3 weeks out of your mesocycle before you have to do like a full systemic deload.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. I will kind of subjectively do that with some travel weeks and stuff. Like when we got here, I'm like, okay, it's been 4 days. Like I want to go to the gym. I'm a little underslept. I'm a little underhydrated. I'm not going to do my cluster sets on the fucking pendulum squat, right? I'm just going to do like my leg extensions, like 2 sets of like a squat pattern, take them to like a 2 RAR. Like I just want to get in and move, but I know I'm not, it's going to be a pseudo deload of sorts based on circumstances.
Yep, for sure. Veteran moves right there. I threw a video on my story last week of my 3RM back squat that I found from 2017 when I did my last strength cycle. So it was a 405 triple. and I watched it and just kind of looked at, the way I move and the way my back collapsed on the third rep, and the third rep literally like stopped mid rep, like it stopped halfway up, and then my like back caved over, and then somehow I like good morninged my way out of it. So it's I think already, without even finishing out the strength cycle, and I do intend to at least give it like another couple weeks here, but even if I didn't finish the strength cycle, I think that right now at this moment, the fact that I hit a 390 single yesterday that moved relatively quickly, I would call this strength cycle a huge success. And I would also say that even beyond that the last 4 to 5 years of straight up hypertrophy training have at least maintained strength in the powerlifting movements, if not even improved it. So curious to see kind of where this all ends up. But I think that my ultimate goal at the end of this strength cycle, like initially I was like, I would love to beat my 405 by 3 and do 405 by 3 again, but make it better. And I think now I don't know that I need to do that. I don't think my ego needs to do that, and I don't think my body needs to feel that. But what I do want to do is continue this cycle and hit a 405 single that is as smooth as, what my 365 single was when I started this cycle, what will be 8 weeks prior. And I think if I can hit a 405 single at, a subjective RPE 7 or whatever, that pretty much correlates to like a 405 by 3 or a 405 by 4 or something like that. So without having to actually go and kill myself by doing that, I can kind of have this notion in my mind that I did in fact move the weight at the speed that would designate or notate that I could do 405 by that many reps.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, 405 at, an RPE 7 or something like that, something that's like looks good, it's clean, you feel happy and confident about it. I would consider that a massive win at this point, especially with the amount of time realistically you are willing to dedicate to a strength block.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just honestly like so ready to get this strength block over with. Talking with Brandon too, like he brought up the exact thing that was in my brain, which is hypertrophy is such a forgiving, stimulus that you can train it in so many different ways. And like, if you don't feel great one day, you can sub this movement out for that movement. And like all of those things he was saying, I was like, I know, I can't wait. Like I'm so excited. So yeah. I'm ready to stop, like, just, it's the psychological arousal piece of like that 2RM. And did you see the poll I put up on my story?
I did. And
so I asked what was harder.
Yeah.
It was what was harder, a 3RM back squat or a 12RM hack squat or leg press or pendulum squat or whatever. And I think it was 70% of people said that the pendulum or the hack was harder for 12. And it's so interesting to look at it from those perspectives, because like you and I were saying last week that we kind of feel like the 3RM back squat is heavier because you can almost build your psychological arousal for that 12RM set as you're going through it. Like you don't have to hype yourself up before the set. You just kind of get to rep 6 and you're like, all right, here we go. We're in it, So I think for me and my mentality, that's a lot better for me because I like remaining like chill and like super low key going into my sets. And I find it very like fatiguing mentally for me to have to get excited for my sets beforehand.
I find it fatiguing, and I would say what I even find more so is just the fear. Like, when you're warming up and you're getting into your like 3s and your 2s, like it is for me, it's just just this impending fear. Like, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to put that weight on and it's just going to fucking pin me at the bottom and I've just wasted all of this and I feel like dog shit? And, for me, it's that fear, but you don't get that in the 12 rep mat. I mean, at worst case, like you maybe fail on rep 11 and it's just like you just sit on the ground a little bit and you're like breathing heavy and stuff. But like to me, it's just a completely different beast, like 100%. Yeah.
Like, I think for sure, like, the level of pain you feel in the 12RM hack squat is for sure higher, but I don't know that I would think that necessarily makes that a harder thing to do. That's
a very, very good point. It's all relative to your person and how you, I guess, internalize psychological and physical pain. For example, I will 100% take the physical pain, right? I will sit whenever I get big tattoos and stuff, I want to take them in as few sessions as possible. I don't care if I need to sit there for 15 hours, But if we can do it in 2 sessions, I will do that. However, with that psychological fear, you're like, Aaron, you need to go, make a new friend or something like that. I'm like, fuck no, absolutely not. I can't deal with the mental anguish. Like, I'd rather deal with the physical pain. So I think that's how I will vote on that. So I think most people will obviously go with the opposite.
Yeah. I have 2 really quick updates, and then I have one more longer one, but I'll jump over to you after these quick 2. So my heel is still bothering me, but it feels like it's getting better. For anyone that's been following along, I had a weird heel thing from running a couple weeks ago, and it still only shoots pain into my heel when I do one specific thing, which is bend over without thinking about it. So as long as I think about it when I bend over, everything seems to be fine. Just a weird old man injury, I guess. Vasectomy, no pain anymore. I'm almost fully pain-free. So that's great news. Only 6 or 7 weeks later. And now we just wait and see if my super sperm are going to be able to be contained or not at the next semen analysis. So to be determined there. And then one more update before my final update. We have Kassem Hanson coming on the show next week. So by the time this is released to the public, it will be the day that Cass comes on. So I may hit you guys up on my story and ask for a couple questions, but I also have a list of questions I want to ask, and I know you probably have some in your brain as well. For anyone that doesn't remember, Aaron is going to the N1 practical in early December here in Boulder. So what great timing for Cass to come on.
Perfect. I'm so excited. I like watching all the videos and everything. Like, it's just... I feel like a child. He's getting ready to go to like summer camp or something like that. Except I'm 33 and just gonna go lift weights with strangers somewhere. But
I'm so jealous that you're doing this before I am. Yeah. Like I know I've had the experience of getting up there and training with him and stuff, but it's just so different to be able to actually go through that practical.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited, and my thoughts are just like, I could only imagine how much I'm going to take away and things I'm going to learn and like what that's going to allow me to do moving forward. And I'll share. I think it's great to share this because then I can come back and see whether my assessments have been correct or not. What I'm hoping to get most out of it is to become more efficient with my training. So right now, let's say I do I'm just throwing a number out there, 12 sets per week for back, right? To get what I determine like a sufficient stimulus, whatever. If I can do that in 7 sets, fantastic, right? Because then I get I'm more time efficient. I can spend less time at the gym, even though I love being there. But maybe what I can do then is prioritize some of that time, right? That tangible time to things that I 100% always neglect, like triceps and biceps type of thing. So that's what I'm really excited for. Hopefully that just becoming more efficient.
Well, I'm really excited to hear your rundown of it. I almost feel like we should do an entire episode talking about your experience there.
I think we should, yeah.
Afterwards. Yeah. So we'll have Cass on next week. And then I have one more update after you go. I want to talk about some hamstring specialization programming stuff that's on my mind. But let's hear what you got going on in your world right now.
Cool. I only have about 3 of them. So the first one is I really wanted to recap this one because we talked about it on the podcast. And I think it was maybe 2 episodes ago. I talked about one of the reasons I was excited for the move to Arizona is every single time we move, our schedules shift a little bit just because we're somewhere new. We have a drive. Sometimes we change time zones and we just things change a little bit. And I had mentioned that in Utah, I had gotten into this poor groove where I would be up late working till 11 p.m. sometimes. And I wasn't tired at night and some of that stuff. And what I'm very happy to report is it completely switched. So what was really interesting, and here they don't do daylight savings time, so time actually stayed the same, and it was very, very confusing for me for a couple of days. I still don't think I really quite understand it, but I'm getting up super early, 6:15 on the dot. I'm up, and here that's right about first light. Sometimes it's still dark. But then by 10, 9:45, 10, I'm in bed out, and I've been sleeping super good. I'm putting the AC stupid cold, so that helps. Reading a little bit at night, and I'm super happy with that. I've got that rhythm back that I just love the mornings, right?
Yeah.
And then like with work stuff, obviously we record this podcast around 10, like local time. That's when I might start having some calls and stuff. But I want to be up for like 3 hours before that, doing some like just having some personal time type of thing, maybe reading a little bit, listening to a podcast, going for a walk. So I've been really happy to fall back into that, which is really, really cool. And then, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, the mornings, dude. I don't understand people that are night people that can like sleep until 9 or 10 and then they're just like up till 3 a.m. or something like that. It like boggles my mind how people work more effectively at night, because I'm the same as you. Like I wake up now at like 5:30 with no alarm, and the first thing I do is straight to my couch, and I'm sitting there and I'm doing little bits of work that for whatever, my brain is like inspired, and I have the mental focus and the clarity and the energy, and I just like pop out of bed and get to work. And especially with the nanny showing up, nanny not showing up, like holidays and all the things happening, the work that I get done before the kids wake up in the morning is like the best work I do any day. So I fully relate to all that.
Not to get too sidetracked, but I just wanted to follow up with the one thing you said. For the people who generally do find themselves like more energy at night and that sort of thing, they generally have flipped circadian rhythms. So if those people were to get like, it wouldn't show up necessarily on a serum cortisol test because that's only 1 point. But if you were to get like a ZRT 4-point saliva cortisol test or like a Dutch or something like that, those people will generally have a peak in cortisol in the evenings, which is like where people like you and I, we have the complete opposite because we follow a more like a more natural circadian rhythm, where theirs might have been flipped from adrenal issues, some hormone stuff. I mean, there's a myriad of different reasons, but if you do find yourself that you're like one of those people who drags ass in the morning and then feels fantastic at night and you want to work late at night and stuff, it's generally linked to your cortisol.
Yeah, make sure you see some sunlight in the first like hour of the day. Get outside and get some sun in your eyes, or at least some daylight.
Yep.
And that makes a huge difference.
It really, really does. Cool. Okay, this one, I'll talk about this one first, and then I want to spend a little bit more time on the other one. So, as you all know, I've been doing like a gut protocol. We've been going higher fat with my diet because of that for the gut protocol, and then my body responded really, really well to it. I got even leaner, which was really kind of stupid. Even though that I was eating like much higher fat and my calories were still going up. And then we talked about my big testing day where we were going to get, the DEXA, which we talked about last week, lab work, and then the check-in photos. So the lab work came back, and my physiologically, my body does not like the higher fat. So a lot of things were very, very similar. My total testosterone went down like 30 some points, but back to like what is more normal for me. So the previous one was at like 640, which was the highest it ever was. I'm generally like a high 5s, low 600s type of person. That's like my other like 6 sets of labs have all shown that. So that was back. My thyroid is pretty much the same. And those are generally the two big ones you are most concerned about as a male with staying too lean. So that being said, those are pretty much negligible changes, but my hemoglobin A1C came back the highest it's been since I was probably 220, 225. So like over 3 years, almost 3.5 years now. And my fasting blood glucose was the highest I'd ever seen it on lab work. Interestingly, because, my carbohydrate was significantly lower. And then the real kicker was my lipid profile was the worst I'd ever seen it on lab work. My LDL cholesterol was like 157 or 158 or something like that. And normally it does run a tad bit high over like your standard range. It'll run in like the 103s to like 105. 99 is generally that cutoff point. But I mean, this is like 50 some points higher than I've ever seen it on lab work. So while from a physique standpoint, I've responded really well to the higher fat diet. From an internal health standpoint, complete opposite. My body internally was not a fan. So my coach saw that. He was like, okay, yep, he's like, this is something that will happen. This is exactly what happens to me. My lipid profile takes a dump, but he was mostly concerned with the HbA1c. So we are back on the sauce, which is carbohydrate, and the fats are significantly lower again. And now I'm going through that phase like, fuck, how did I used to fill all these carbohydrate, right? So without just like eating like an asshole. So was like why eye-opening. I did not anticipate seeing that at all, especially the HbA1c and fasting glucose. And what's also really interesting is my fasting insulin was also higher. My fasting insulin is generally very, very low, almost undetectable.
It's so interesting because you expect the lipid profile to be a little bit higher because you're eating more fats and whatever, no surprise there. But yeah, the glucose and the insulin stuff, very, very interesting. And I don't exactly understand what the mechanism is that's making that happen.
So, I mean, my body does respond interestingly with glucose. I'm very close, on paper, to being like a pre-diabetic. But that's I have family history of that. Mine just run really high, and that's kind of why I did those continuous glucose monitor tests, because all my fasting numbers are always very high, but what we would see is when I would sleep, my numbers would just kind of slowly creep up as I was sleeping, and my fasting blood glucose levels postprandial, post meals, will be some of the lowest all day. They would drop into the 70s and stuff after meals. But then when I was sleeping, the average would be 110, 112.
That's backwards though, right?
That's backwards from what a lot of people experience. Postprandial, they'll jump really high, or they'll remain elevated, but then they'll kind of, drip or drop throughout the night. But I'm pretty much the complete opposite. But regardless of what I do with carbohydrate, mine don't really budge much. I could have 700 grams of carbs one day and I'll still, have 95 to low 100s fasting, or I can have 50 carbs and it'll still remain pretty much the same. So mine doesn't really fluctuate much to carbohydrate. But to kind of wrap this one up, it was really interesting to see that my body internally was not a fan of all the fats. And one last note I will make there, I was very, very diligent in filling these fats with very high quality sources. So extra virgin olive oil, avocado, Brazil nuts, walnuts, chia seeds. I was doing ground flaxseed until I found it was fucking with my stomach a little bit. So it's not like I was having bacon and a bunch of saturated fats or anything like that. I really tried to do my due diligence there and really fill it with polyunsaturated and monounsaturated sources. And my body just didn't like it. So kind of why I love talking around getting blood work done and understanding that everyone's body is going to be a little bit different and finding out how your body responds. And then at some point, understanding there can be a dichotomy between physique and health. Just because you're responding well from a physique standpoint doesn't mean your body is doing great as well. And that kind of comes down to when people think oh, I want to, look like that person who's on stage, but doesn't realize that person is in a hormonally a terrible position, likely in many cases.
So did you notice improvement in your gut on that protocol, and has there been any negative consequence since you've introduced carbohydrates again more?
No, actually. So yes, things have improved, and this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit more next. And I haven't really noticed anything with carbohydrate, but I am taking very safe carbohydrates. So cream of rice, I have started reintroducing a little bit of oats in the morning, a lot of rice. I'm also doing a lot of fruit. So kiwi daily, strawberries daily, blueberries, and mandarins daily. So I'm doing a fair share of fruit.
Cool.
But yeah, I anticipate things will continue to progress well there, which leads me into my next point. So a while back when we had Brandon, it's funny, we're talking about Brandon in a few different aspects here today on the podcast, and we asked him some digestion questions, and he took it a very different direction than I thought he was going to. And he started with your absolute basics. And one of the basics that he started with and covered was simply eating slower, right? Preparing for a meal. And one of the reasons why is there's kind of two forms of digestion, right? We have mechanical digestion, we have chemical digestion. The mechanical digestion and overwhelming part of it is mastication, which is just a fancy word for you chewing your food, and then a little bit of the smooth musculature in your stomach that when you have your motility movements will kind of push, and break down some of the food there as well. And then in your mouth, we have saliva, different enzymes produced in the saliva, and the majority is in our stomach hydrochloric acid, and then in our small intestines, we get chemical digestion. For so many of us, and I was super, super guilty of this, and my girlfriend Jenny was very, very, I don't even want to say helpful, adamant that this is something that I'm really poor at. I'm very poor on the mechanical digestion side of things. And we were trying to think back to like when I may have created these habits, but I'm almost kind of embarrassed talking about it, but she would say like when I eat, it's like watching an animal eat. And some of the things that I've done specifically so that I could eat faster is like I put everything in bowls instead of plates. And then I never
use a spoon instead of a
fork.
fork.
And I always use a spoon instead of a fork so I can just get it in faster. And I was like super notorious, am notoriously bad at like chew, swallow. Like, and when you talk to people, they say you should chew like 15 or 20 times. Like I'm a
30. It's 30 times.
I'm a 2 to 3 swallow.
Yeah. And you're also not supposed to drink water when you eat either because it messes up with the digestion process, which means you should be essentially chewing your food till it turns to liquid, which I'm just like you. I've been told I am like an animal when I eat as well.
Yeah. And what's funny is I like thinking back to it and like I'm 100% guilty. It's very rare that I will like actually sit down and eat. Like I'll stand in the kitchen with my food and like literally with my spoon and just shovel it in.
I do the same. Yeah.
And I've been really, really trying to be just like more intentional. Like I stopped eating everything with a spoon, or when I have my breakfast, I'll use the smaller spoon now instead of the like Mondo one. And it's been really helping. And it sounds like silly because of course it's helping because I'm helping my body. You know, I'm assisting the chemical process of digestion by mechanically doing my part by chewing my food and stuff like that and slowing down. And it's been really, really beneficial. But kind of what I wanted to go back to a little bit is like where did I create these habits? And I think they probably came from like gaining periods, or when I was younger, I learned that like when you're trying to gain weight, right, some of the problem that a lot of people have is like you get full. So something that I realized like many years ago was like the faster you eat, you can like beat that signal. And it's funny because I remember like when we would do those like eating the wings all the time, I would tell my friends like, no, you have to eat faster because the faster you eat, you will like beat that signal that you're full, and then you can get more in. And I think I just developed these like these like stupid, you know, kind of primitive eating habits that have now like probably been a large issue, or contributing, I should say, I don't know necessarily large, a contributing factor to my digestive issues, because I eat like a freaking dog instead of like a human being. So I've been really, really in the past like, you know, week or so trying to slow down and be really, you know, much more intentional with this. And coincidentally, even with all these extra carbohydrates, it's been on Thursday, it'll be like a week of the higher carbs, 0 issues. And like we literally, carbs went from 220 to 350 on training days, and then 130 to 280 on my rest days. So they've gone up considerably overnight, and I'm still doing pretty well there.
Well, that's great. Again, you're prioritizing quality. I wonder how much of that like rush to get food down and devour it comes from like our ancestors' shortage of food and competition for food. And then maybe we even see it in more of like a current time with sibling rivalry. Like I remember even, in high school, my mom puts out a plate of food and it's my brother and I, and we're both teenagers. And it's just like, who can get the most food off that plate as quickly as possible before the other one does? Cause then there's not going to be as much left. So I don't know, like maybe it's historical from generations prior. Maybe it's, ingrained from my relationship with my brother and our competition for food. Or like you said, the gaining phases and fitting more in your stomach. All of these are good reasons, but I also feel the same, that I tend to devour food way too quickly. And so I've tried to recently put my spoon or fork down after each bite. So I'll like take a bite and then set it down, and then I have to finish chewing my current bite, and then I can pick it up and take a new bite. Cause I'm the same way, like spoonful in, okay, that rice and chicken's like 90% down. Okay, new bite. And like before you know it, it's been 1 minute and your entire like 8-ounce chicken and rice dish is gone. So gotta stop.
Another thing that I would notice when eating out with people, my food would be gone and people would be like maybe 20% through theirs, and then and I just like sit there awkwardly because everyone's eating for another 20 minutes and I'm just like 100% done.
Well, it's like, how do you make a burger into any more than 6 bites? because I can't do that. It's a 6-bite meal. It's like one bite every 30 seconds, and I'm done in 3 minutes. Boom.
The last thing I will say there that I've been doing is eating with chopsticks.
Yeah, I've heard of people
That's
saying
a
that too.
that's a and I'm like proficient enough from when we lived in Vietnam and that I can use them like sufficiently and pick up rice and stuff. But it just forces you to slow down. So that's another thing I've been doing. But yeah,
Cool.
so slowing down, chewing my food, it helps with my digestion. No shit, right?
Well, we should continue this in future episodes because I'm also going to try and make a concerted effort to eat a little bit slower. We'll see how it plays out.
Okay, cool. So a couple reasons why I wanted to talk about this is it's something that I don't think people understand enough of and don't really think about the value that can be provided there. So what happened with this in my own personal life is like when I was in like my senior year in college, like I was super over the like college gym, which was like very similar to like a Gold's, whatever. Just the environment was just very non-motivating for me, and it really burnt me out on going to the gym. And this was what kind of pushed me into CrossFit. And then that kind of forever changed how I value gyms because you went from paying like, I don't even know back in like 2009, like $15 a month for a gym to like 185, especially with me moving to San Diego, everything was more expensive. But it was like even that change of like $150 or $160 more, like the value I got was so much higher. Like it was a no-brainer because the value outweighed the cost so much for me. And then obviously as I went through and then landed at your gym, and then that was like a whole new experience, literally a life-changing experience for me. It really completely flipped how I thought about gyms. And now like moving forward, I only search out like independently owned gyms or like independently owned strength and conditioning facilities. So I only train at like a Gold's or an EOS or a 24, like when I absolutely need to, because one, the equipment's generally worse. Like the barbells in these places are like, I don't even know who fucking makes these types of barbells, but they're god awful.
Mass produced.
Yeah, they're mass produced. The equipment is just like you have like these super old hack squats and leg presses. Oh my god, don't even get me started about the leg presses where you can't even reach depth on them, and it's like it's
Yeah.
really just wildly, kind of eye-opening for me, and it's really just changed my whole perception of it. And for example, like I had a client who was training at like a Planet Fitness, and he was like, well, it's like $40 cheaper than the other gyms. And I'm like, and I had to like break it down to him, like, dude, we can get like, let's get this $40 somewhere else. Like they don't have a hack squat, they don't have a leg press, and he's like a bigger dude, like 205.
They actually don't have barbells.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, the dumbbells only go up to 75s. And I'm like, and he's like, he's strong. He's like us strong. I'm like, bro, like, let's go, let's find this other gym. Like we can, if it's really like, let's get this $40 a month from your budget from somewhere else. But the value you will get will be so much more. Like he was just so limited and was only coming to it from like a purely financial standpoint without seeing like all the extras that we could get without that. And I kind of just wanted to like open that conversation up and talk about it because, in terms of one, equipment availability, right? Especially if you've never been on like one of the sweet hack squats from like Arsenal or something like that, like it is a completely different game changer, especially in some of these maybe muscles that you are like lagging body parts. Different machinery that's like well designed can really, really help you target and move better, which is going to allow you to produce more hypertrophy and bring these muscle groups up that you've been struggling with, type of thing. So I just wanted to talk about it. Like, what are some of the things that you look for or were important to you when creating the gym, when having the gym? And then for people out there who want to step up their gym upgrade and move away from your Globo Gym type membership.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you don't see commercial gyms that have the feel or setup or class structure or any of the components that you get in the CrossFit style gym. Probably the closest that you'd get to that is kind of what OPEX has done with their model. And I think you're familiar with this. I think we've talked about it, but basically what OPEX has done is they've branded their like CrossFit style gyms as OPEX gyms. But they don't do classes anymore. So it's not like you pay, $150 a month and, you're in a class with 12 or 15 other people. Essentially what the gym is it's an open gym atmosphere, and every single person that attends the gym has a individually written program. So they go into this like CrossFit style gym and they conduct their own individually written program alongside however many other people are in there also conducting their own individual programs. So I think that model is really cool in that it gives you the community feel of being able to train with other people that are on a similar path as you, without having to fit into like the general model of, we're just doing a CrossFit class and this model is the same for a beginner as it is for an advanced person minus what weights you're using or whatever, or the intensity that you can implement. So the OPEX model gym is like, $300 to $400 a month because everyone's getting an individually designed program plus a space to complete that program in. That model obviously doesn't work, I think, in like a commercial gym setting. I don't exactly, like, maybe it would, I guess, I don't know if it would work because depending on how many people you had in there and how many people want to use the machine or need to use the machine. But I think that there is a way that model could be implemented. I just don't know that people that, like, to your point, the people that are going to the commercial gym are almost going to the commercial gym because they want to pay $25 to $50 a month because they don't want to pay $300 to $400 a month, right?
Man, I feel like it's like they haven't been. Oh man, what is it? Damn it! I was gonna use the red pill versus blue pill thing, but I don't remember which one was which. so it breaks down. But I think it's like red pilled. It's like they haven't been red pilled yet because they don't know what is on the other side of the fence type of deal.
Yeah. I think, like, personally, I would love that model. Like, it actually gets me excited to think about having like 2 or 3 hack squat machines, 2 or 3 pendulums, like 2 or 3 of everything in a gym that you have people come in and they just conduct a program that you write for them. And suddenly you have like a community of like 300 people of badasses that are all training for the same thing. But that would be like plucking out the like top 2% from the Gold's gym or from the Globo gym. And then being like, okay, you're motivated. You have a plan. Like, you're working hard. Here's an individual plan for you. Now you get to pay $300 a month and come to my gym. So in that sense, like, I think it's a little bit ridiculous, but I love the idea of it. I love the idea of training with people toward a similar goal, but utilizing the equipment that you would find at a really good commercial gym. But what you said about independently owned gyms is such a good point, because I have never had an experience at like a Gold's or an EOS or a Planet Fitness or any of those gyms or whatever, where I felt like it was a great experience, like I have at the gym in San Diego, the Armbrust Pro Gym in Denver, the one I went up to train with Nunez and Miner in Fort Collins is another, just like, it had like 5 rooms and has like every piece of equipment from like the 1970s through the 2020s, and it's got like the new stuff and the old stuff and dumbbells up to 170 and like everything you could possibly imagine, all the best equipment, right? And so the experience that you get at that gym is so much better too, because even though that gym is filled with like your average general gym goer as well as like kind of your more elite level physique athlete, when you go to like a Gold's and stuff, you don't get any of those like elite level physique athletes. Like, none of those guys are training there. Yes, you'll see a guy here and there that's on steroids or a power lifter that's lifting heavy on the platform or whatever, but like the general quality of movement and quality of like exercise execution and programming and just the general people that you might meet and network with in a Gold's is so far below what you would get at one of those kind of independently owned bodybuilding gyms.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that you said really kind of hammer home that point. It's environment, right? And we know what environment does. Like, kind of what you said a couple podcast episodes ago, like, right now, like, you just wouldn't be motivated to do like competitor level CrossFit programming in your garage by yourself. But if, like, I guarantee if I were to like drop you in a class and there's like all of us from 8 years ago, like that ego is going to start clawing its way back out because of simply the environment. And that's potentially like a negative use case there. But with these, if you were to take that same person, right, who's training in like your 24 or whatever, going through the motions, everyone else around them's going through the motions, they're paying whatever $30 a month, and you were to say like, hey, well, how much, like, if I were to say in over the next 6 months, right, we can like, what are your goals, right? And they give you some of the goals that they're just literally going through the motions on. You say, okay, 6 months, we can take care of X, Y, and Z, right? In an incredibly motivated environment where you have people who are where you want to be. We know how to get you there. We're going to give you, obviously that customized programming, whatever, but it's going to be $400 a month. So would you pay, oh man, I should always pick easier numbers. 6 times 4, right? That's $2,400, $2,400, right? Over those 6 months. And then let's say the standard Gold's membership would be like $400 over those months, just for even numbers. Like, would you pay $2,000 over the next 6 months to reach your goals and be highly motivated each day? I would say of 10 people, 7 are probably going to jump on that immediately. So I think it's people just...
Maybe.
I would say so. Especially for people who've been like, it's all how you frame it. When's the last time, you made X progress type thing? It's just really connecting to what those values are and those people who actually do value it. And that is the dichotomy. Like there's some people who don't, and they just straight up don't. And that's perfectly fine. There's other people who do, but they just don't know that there is like a completely different pathway or these like independently owned gyms and stuff. That's all they know. So
I think that the answer to that question would almost come down to like the audience that you're speaking to, in that, I feel like there's like this 2-factor audience model that you and I associate with, right? You have your audience that you have to urge them to take a rest day. It's like, hey, you're training really hard. Like, you're going beyond failure. You need to take rest days. And then there's the other audience that's like, you're stopping everything 5 reps shy of failure and you're looking for any excuse to take a rest day. And so there's these two audiences that are extremely dichotomous. And this is what we see in the Paragon group as well, is we have some people that I have to speak to them as if like I'm trying to pull them back. Like, hey, rest days are really important. And like, ooh, I don't know, you were resting about 10 seconds between back squat reps. Like, I can't really say that that's like really good training, and then there's the other people that are like, they're going through their back squat set and they like finish their set and they like walk away and they're like big smile on their face, like not breathing hard, and you're like, you could probably push that a little closer to failure, so I think maybe when you're thinking about choosing a gym, like maybe where you fit in that model is important too. And maybe it works both ways. Like you could be the person that always has excuses and doesn't train, they're not committed to the process. Maybe it's because they're at the wrong gym. Maybe that person's experience is improved drastically by going to the good gym. But by the same token, maybe it's not. Like maybe they go to the good gym and they're just like, oh, these guys are all like really hardcore. Like it's even more intimidating than going to like 24-hour fitness or whatever. Like I think I'll just hang out in my corner over here and keep doing what I'm doing. Whereas if you pluck that person out of like a Golds or a 24-hour fitness that is like the hashtag no rest days person, and they're already like intrinsically motivated, like you don't need to push them at all. They push themselves hard enough, right? Then you take them to a gym like that and they get more stimulus to fatigue ratio out of their movements. They start networking and talking with people that knock some sense into their head, and suddenly their experience improves drastically too. So it's interesting. I think it's very individual, and it may fit into like that 2-factor audience that I mentioned.
One thing you said that I really, really like that I think sums it up well is the intrinsically motivated. I think that's a beautiful way to capture it. Yeah.
So I don't know, like I honestly think that just if you haven't experienced one of these more like kind of independently owned bodybuilding style gyms, like you really should. And I think you even put it at 60 to 75 a month. I think 40 to 60 would probably be more what I see. Like I joined the gym in San Diego for $50 a month. And then the one in Fort Collins that I went to with Nunez was I believe also like 35 to 45 a month too. So super cheap, and they have like the best equipment, right? So then like you have your Golds and your 24s. And I remember even at 24, 10 years ago, it being $35 a month or something like that. So I'm guessing those ones are also in that same like kind of 30 to 50 range. And yeah, maybe like Planet Fitness and Crunch and like some of those lower level commercial gyms are like, 10, 12, $14 a month or whatever it is. But like Planet Fitness is like the bottom of the barrel. They literally, you're talking about your client, but the dumbbells only go to 75. I didn't even know they went that high. And they really don't have barbells. Like it's only Smith machines. You can't actually use a barbell in there. And then they have the lug alarm, right?
Yeah.
Where if you drop weights, or if you grunt or make noise or work too hard, then they kick you out of the gym. I think literally work too hard is one of the qualifiers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That if you're there, please, like, let's get you somewhere else. I will personally look up gyms near you. And I will do that myself if you're training there. The last thing for me. So I'm in this, this pickle around picking a gym. There are two here nearby. I've been to both of them now. I just started my week pass at the farther away one, which is about like a 12-minute drive. It's called Muscle Factory. It's over in Tempe. And then the other one is Independence Gym here in Scottsdale, which is literally like a 10-minute walk. So 10-minute walk versus like a 10-minute drive. The hard thing is the further away gym has an Atlantis Pendulum. It has the Cybex squat press, which I've used to hate for years and then learned how to use it, and it's now one of my favorites. They have the Arsenal hack squat, which is just like, it's so good. And those I'm like, am I really going to like drive to a gym for those three machines? And the hard answer is like, I kind of think I am. Cost wise, I mean, I don't even remember. One was 65, the other was like 30 plus like a activation fee. I don't even know what it is. Like, that's cost isn't the factor for me. And I learned that when the gyms closed in Mexico when we were there, and then they had underground gym, and I was like, how much would I really pay to go to the gym? And I was like, I don't even want to answer it, because it would really come down to like, how much money do I have and what else am I going to do with my day type of thing. So man, I do not know. I want to go to the local gym or the closer one so I can walk, because that's like fantastic. I'll hit my step count pretty much just from walking to the gym, moving around the gym while I'm there and walking home. Like, my steps are basically done for the day. And that gets me back, 40 minutes of my day or so comparatively. But they don't have a hack squat, or they do have a hack squat, but it's like a super old pre-core one where I know I'm not going to be able to hit full depth type on. The leg presses are god awful. Like, it just opens the bigger questions, like, who the fuck was designing these leg presses in the 90s and shit like that? Like, it's outrageous. And of course there's no pendulum. So leg day, I'll have to get a little more creative and not use any of the niceties of the 21st century for training legs, but I have to drive every day.
So I have a proposal. Why not just buy 2 memberships and do leg day at the far one and upper body day at the close one?
I thought about that too. I mean,
absolutely, for like $35 extra or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it would maybe be like, but yeah, because the one, it wouldn't be much more money. I could just like literally do that too.
That's what I would do, man. And I think you should totally take advantage of having like the Arsenal hack and the Atlantis Pendulum and really get the good quality work in, because in your travels and stuff, you're probably not going to be in places that have that high level of equipment everywhere that you go.
Yeah, why not both? That might be the solution there.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else on this one, Bryan?
Nah, man. Cass just texted me, so I'm getting excited for next week. I asked him if there were any topics that he wanted us to discuss, and he said, no, it's your audience, whatever you want. So
perfect.
So you and I are going to have to get together and come up with some cool questions.
Yep. I'm trying not to sound too dumb.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not talk about biomechanics.
Let's like keep it really basic.
Cool. We'll just paraphrase what he says.
Yeah. All right. So as always, guys, thank you for listening. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.